Hey guys, it's Chris Truitt from the Reluctant Somm. We're really excited about season 3. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening. Just wanted to give another little note that if you like what we're doing and you want to show us some support, reviews, likes, shares, word of mouth, all of these things really help us. We'll also be creating a newsletter this year that focuses on some of our favorite restaurants, favorite wine lists, favorite places to eat, as well as just some really cool people in the industry, as well as some other insights into what's going on in our field of profession. I also wanted to let you know that on that is where we'll be updating everybody on all of our pop-ups and any collaboration events or anything that we're doing. So if you want to keep track of us, that's the best way. Also, if you're not already following us on Instagram, you can follow us at Reluctant Somm on Instagram and keep up with us. Give us likes. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Brian, I'm excited to have you on. I have been selling your wines now for almost 3 years and have been drinking them for a little bit longer. They have a great foothold in San Francisco, I think, and most places that I went, people were always like really excited to show them and talk to me about them, given that I was a kid from Texas that didn't really know anything about many smaller producers from California. And I love what you guys do beyond the wine, which is all things that we can kind of get into. But usually the way that we start is you kind of just give a quick recap of yourself, your life, where it started. And
yeah, I mean, I think that's really nice for me to hear because, you know, I just figured out we're in our 19th year.
Wow.
And I kind of felt like to do what we're trying to do, it would take close to 20 years.
Yeah.
So maybe we got there a little bit ahead of schedule. So, you know, it all goes back to, you know, my time living in San Francisco. And this was, you know, back in the 90s. And I really already had an interest in wine from around my stepfather, who had a interesting wine collection. He was very generous sharing wine with me. But then when I moved out to San Francisco and, you know, explored the restaurant scene here, you know, Italian food in San Francisco is huge, you know, and it was evolving all the time. And, you know, what I saw was these great Italian restaurants focused on local ingredients, and the wine list had beautiful Italian wines, but the stuff from California tended to be Pinot Noir and Chardonnay and Cabernet and the usual suspects. And I kind of said, well, why aren't there Italian variety wines from California? And, you know, there was kind of this Calital movement that was fizzling out at the time, and, you know, wasn't very successful. But, you know, I was exploring and trying to find wineries that I liked that were producing Italian varieties. And I was working in an office here in San Francisco, and I didn't really enjoy my job very much, and sat in front of a computer all day. And I got to know some winemakers. I was at a party one night, and it was Jeff Cohn, who's the winemaker at Rosenblum. And this was 2001 or 2 or something. And I said, you know, how'd you get into making wine? You know, and he told me, and he'd been drinking some wine, and I said, well, you know, I think I'd like to try to do that. What should I do? And he goes, well, harvest starts in a couple weeks. Why don't you just come work for me? I was like, okay. And I had a job, you know, in San Francisco financial district, nothing fancy, but
Sure.
it was a kind of steady job. I had a rent to pay, and I went in on Monday. This is like a Saturday, and I said, you know, I'm getting a new job. I'm going to make wine or work in a winery,
right.
doing who knows what. I'd been in wineries, like tasting rooms, but didn't know much more than that. And they said, well, you can just pack your stuff up and hit the bricks today, because that's the way those jobs work.
Yeah.
You know, when you put in your 2-week notice, you're kind of done. So I said, okay, my new career starts Monday. So Monday, called the winery. Jeff wasn't available. Called Tuesday. Called when, you know, and I'm calling and calling. I'm like, I'm out of a job,
Right.
and I'm supposed to do this new thing that I'm really excited about. And so finally, I just drove over there. It was probably 4 days of like,
Phone tag.
I'm in big trouble.
Yeah.
There was no tagging. He was not calling
Yeah,
me.
because
I was tagging. He was not tagging back. So, I show up and he's like, "Oh, you're that kid that keeps calling. You want to start working now? It's like 2 p.m." And I'm like, "Can I just come back tomorrow?" And he's like, "That's fine." And I was like, "Okay." And so I show up the next day, 8 a.m., whatever, and they're basically, guys in the cellar like, "Oh, we have this new guy to help us do our work." So they go, "Okay, rack these barrels into this tank and then rack the tank back into the barrels." And I didn't even know what that meant.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what racking. So, with this stick and this hose, and I was spilling stuff, and they also said taste all the barrels. So,
right.
Tasted the barrels, and there was no spitting. There was no, and I'm getting kind of tanked. There were some very high octane wines at Rosenblum, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna figure this out. It was a total mess. But worked a whole day and got it done, I guess, and went home, and I was like, this is what I want to do. Like, this is so much more fun than what I was doing before.
Yeah.
So that started it, and then I learned and I worked a harvest, and then I said, okay, now I need to go to Italy. Went to Italy, visited a bunch of wineries.
You reached out to Isola Elena.
Yeah, so I fortunately had someone who would take me. So then next year I went, after working a year at Rosenblum, I went to Italy and I worked at Isola, and I brought all these wines from Rosenblum over there. I was really excited. And they didn't taste like anything they'd ever tasted before, that's for sure. They were like, these are something you would have with dessert, right? And I said, no, these are like wines that have these big scores, and Wine Spectator loved them. And but I quickly realized, and I knew Italian wine, but I transformed into this real serious Italian wine person from that point on. And I spent time every weekend visiting different wineries, and on that trip I reconnected with relatives in Sicily, and it changed everything. It changed my whole world. So working at Isola, which at the time had a lot of early success, it made me think like, wow, I can do something really amazing back in California. So decided to go to school and learn about winemaking, and that's where I met my wife Stephy, who was kind of on a similar path on the viticultural side of things. And so that's how it all began. Living and working in Italy, and really being immersed in the food and wine culture there. Their food and wine are together. They kind of share equal significance.
I've heard some people call wine a condiment to the meal, but
Yeah.
a lot of people would argue that it's just as important as the meal.
Yeah. No, I think what I love about Italy and what I learned on that trip is everything, has importance, especially at the table, and, whether it's the cheese and where the cheese is made. I remember one day, Paolo's wife showed up with fresh mozzarella she was kind of driving down to Rome or something, and she got some fresh mozzarella, and it was like, they were so excited, and I'm like, oh, it's mozzarella, whatever, and I knew it'd be good, but it's so exciting. And now I completely get it. Now I've been to Italy 20 times or something, and that's what I look for.
Yeah.
I search out wine. I always want to learn more about wine. It's an endless life lesson, but Italy is herbs being grown, and tomatoes, where the best tomatoes grown, and pasta, which is something I got into, and it's just endless, and it's so hyper local and specific, and it's the wine and the food, and it's never ending. It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean it's an important thing I think to point out that I don't think anybody's ever pointed out on the podcast before, that like the food has DOCs. You know what I mean? Like, I know that France has things like that as well, but like, it's not like anybody cares enough to give, vegetables an appellation in the U.S., right? And we can get Mott's year round, but it's not real and fresh and
yeah. I mean,
first of season. I know Mott's doesn't really have first of season.
Yeah, I mean, it's in Italy, I love it because you talk to someone and they can be pretty chill or joke around, and then all of a sudden they go, well, now this is something very important.
Yeah.
Very important means like this is something we've spent generations focused on, and it could be where to grow the perfect tomato.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's crazy stuff, but like you're out in the hills of Campania. I mean, I've told people that I spent a week out, in Grignano, hills of Campania, kind of agriturismo zones. I've never had food so good in my life. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just fresh, and and to them, they know it's good. They don't know it's the best, but there's such a focus.
Yeah. And
a total side note, I went to Japan last year for the first time, and it was the same kind of thing. It's so. I don't think we're there yet here. I mean, people are doing a great job with a variety of things, but when it's generation after generation after generation, we're such a young country. Mm-hmm. So that's what's fascinating.
Well, you're at the forefront of the Italian grape in California movement. I mean, like you said, there had been like a small movement for it before, and I think people just kind of gave up, but 19 years at this now is pretty significant amount of time.
Yeah, and I think, people did give up, and I think what happened, and, you see this with a lot of things, there's a race, and what happened was there was a race between Calatal and the Rhone Rangers, and, people, invested a lot of money in Antinori and these big companies. What's gonna be the next big thing? And it was Sangiovese versus Syrah.
Right.
And I'm not saying they have tons of money in research, but this has to happen over a long period of time, just like it does for everything else.
Right.
And I think everybody wanted things to happen so fast back then, and it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So because there's no real significant movement, I mean, there's more interest, I think, in Italian grapes grown in California now than there has been in a long time. We've been able to really take time and really, my wife out in the vineyard learning, pruning things differently, and just positioning vines and planting our own vineyard after experience on other vineyards. There's no rush because we're not trying. It's not a multi-million-dollar project that we're looking to make a bunch of money from. We knew this was not a road to riches for sure. So that's kind of the way we saw it.
I think that's beautiful, though. I mean, it's kind of more holistic in the sense of realizing that you didn't start the business just to make a bunch of money. Then there's no rush, right? Like as long as you are able to kind of like sustain, then I mean that's kind of like.
Yeah, I mean, I gave up a career, as finance, and the people I worked with, some of them were amazing people, but it was really all about making money, and then what you do in your free time, and whether it's playing golf or travel or whatever you want to do, but. And I had friends that would say, well, in 20 years, I'll be rich enough to retire and then I can play golf. And I'm like, I don't want to do something for 20 years
that I hate.
To just like figure out what I want to do. I'd want to figure out what I want to do and do that for a living. And money was never the top of the priority list. It was really this feeling I had in going to Italy and just seeing the passion for excellence and these very minor detail things. I was like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
We're still figuring it out. I mean,
it's like wine. It's an eternal journey. I mean, it's something that every vintage is going to be different. It doesn't matter what you do, and then your grapes are getting older, the vines are getting older. I guess not the grapes, but yeah. I mean, it's going to be just a constant journey. But do you feel like one of the questions that came to mind for me is, do you feel as though the ability for Italian grapes to grow here, I don't necessarily want to say more easily because it's probably not easier. Do you feel like global warming has had a major impact on the diversity of grapes that can flourish in a region like California?
You know, it's an interesting question, and I see it in a couple ways. I mean, I think for one, Italian grape varieties, especially, this wine, the main grape is Falangino, which is a grape from Campania. It ripens late, it keeps acidity well. It's really well suited to where we are in California and probably a lot of the rest of California as our temperatures warm up. The other interesting thing is there's times in Paso where, the interior of California starts getting really hot and it brings the fog in more. And at times it's almost cooler. And so it depends on where you are. Some of these coastal areas can be a little cooler because of interior heat. So it really depends on where your grapes are planted. But I mean, I'm convinced that, especially where we are in California, and this could be controversial, but Italian grapes are so well suited to where we are more than pretty much anything else.
Right.
I'm sure there's maybe some Greek varieties or other grape varieties that would flourish there, but southern Italy and Central California, especially Paso, and the soils and the climate they're kind of perfect for each other. So it gives us a big advantage.
Yeah.
And Stephy's worked with all the Rhone stuff and other grape varieties, and sometimes it's a struggle.
Yeah.
Whereas he's kind of get through the heat pretty easily.
A little more durable.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's cool. That's great to know. I mean, things like Nebbiolo is something that, like, when I grew up studying wine, it was like, I can't remember the word ever, but there was like a word that was in Intro to Sommelier. It was the book that I got, and it had like all these, glossary of words that you were supposed to know, and I never remembered the word, but it was a grape that can only grow in one region. And that was, Nebbiolo was always the example it gave, that it can never grow anywhere else. No matter how hard anybody tries, it'll never grow anywhere else.
See, I love that. And so Nebbiolo was the first wine we ever made.
Wow. Jesus.
And the reason I love that is the grapes do not know where they're planted.
Right.
They don't. They have no idea.
Sure. Yeah.
So, I think Nebbiolo is a very difficult grape to work with. I mean, it's thin skin. It's susceptible to any kind of problems, but Piemonte has a lot of difficulties with Nebbiolo from a weather perspective, and they used to, I think back in the early days, have like 2 out of 10 good vintages because any kind of weather, hail, tough rains would destroy vineyards.
Right.
Whereas I've even told people, and I'm only half joking about this, I think Aglianico would grow really well in Piemonte.
Yeah.
I really do, with the soil, the climate. It's thicker skinned, it's tough. Never going to happen, but I'd love someone to try it.
Yeah.
I mean, what the hell? I mean, plant an acre. But Italy is so steeped in tradition.
Right.
And the beauty of California is we can do anything we want. And, we've poured our wines at tons of events in Italy. Ian D'Agata brought me over for a big event in the town of Barolo, and we poured our wines alongside every single crew of Barolo. And It wasn't to see what's better or worse,
Sure.
or it was just to learn.
Right.
And I mean, our wine was very interesting, and
Yeah.
winemakers there were very intrigued. I don't think they were talking smack about me behind my back. They asked really interesting questions, and I mean, we've learned a lot over 20 years growing that grape and making the wine from it. So, you know, it seems to do okay in Paso, believe it or not. So
That's cool. Yeah, I think that's exciting, and I mean, it maybe gives some hope to, you know, the concern about Cabernet Sauvignon in Napa Valley. I mean, maybe that gives hope to that. I guess we'll see. And you never know. Maybe there's going to be some hip kids that go in and open up a winery in Piemonte and just go completely against the grain and start doing things like Aglianico. Yeah. I mean,
could happen.
I've had plenty of great Chardonnays from Piemonte. You know, it's like not incredibly common, but you know, there's hope.
Well, you see the resurrection. I mean, most recently, and you know, you're a Somm, you probably know more than I do. But I mean, I've seen Timorasso just kind of explode, and I mean that you didn't even hear about that 5-10 years ago. I mean, I think it's cool because it's a native variety, but that doesn't mean you couldn't plant Fiano in Piemonte. It might. I mean, I think Fiano is one of the greatest grapes in all of Italy, if not the world. And I bet it would do quite well in Piemonte. But I mean, I'm not suggesting that's a good idea because I love tradition.
Yeah.
But you never know.
I hope, you know, most of the time when they're bringing these indigenous varieties back, they're doing a really great job. But maybe that's because they've had so long to learn, or because climate change is affecting it, whether it's slightly or more, but that they're able to bring these grapes back and dust them off and put them back on the mantle where they maybe belong.
Well, I mean, I think they realize the world is always evolving, and consumers are interested in exploration. I mean, you bring up Napa Valley, and I mean, it's pretty much monoculture. I mean, I know there's people doing more interesting stuff, but the price point and just the lack of diversity, and you know, if you're investing in Napa Valley and you know you're not leading with Cabernet, it doesn't work financially, and that's too bad. I mean, that's why for us, I mean, my wife worked in Napa and Sonoma, and my family had a place in Sonoma, but it was never an option because I knew the economics wouldn't work. And you know, now Paso's becoming expensive, but and that's, you know, Barolo is, I think, even more expensive than Napa, so it'd have to be other areas where people can take a chance.
Right. Yeah. Langhe Fiano. I'm
sure.
down. Let's do it.
Why not? No, I mean, I've had like, you know, crazy thought. I mean, I have so many stupid ideas, and Stephy, you know, usually gets really nervous when I start tossing around ideas.
So
but you know, we have a lot of friends now in Italy, and you know, I'm like, God, maybe we should just get a little place and vineyard and try some crazy stuff. You know, I have a friend who's Australian who makes Barbaresco in Barbaresco. It's a crazy journey. I mean, you should, if he comes to the city, Dave Fletcher, you should have him on, because his journey is unbelievable, going from Australia to how to make Barbaresco. But it's an amazing story. I mean, I actually make a great movie. And he resurrected this old train station because it was the only way they'd let him call his wine Barbaresco. And he's planted Chardonnay, and he's doing some, I think he's starting to do a little orange wine. But you know, people are always looking to try new things, and we've seen that with new generations all over Europe. You know, the kids are starting to do some kind of cool, funky labels, like this crazy one that we just came out with. So
I love that. One of the things that you touched on that is a little bit further down my list, but I think it needs to be spoken about, is kind of this monoculture, this monocropping aspect to things. And one of the things we talked about earlier on today was the Lunamata vineyard, and the Lunamata vineyard being removed and planted to Cabernet. And that's something that's happening more and more. We were in Lake County recently and saw this huge swath of land that was just not planted at all, because I think it was Gallo, but one of the larger companies came and bought up all the land, ripped it out to replant it, and then just decided, like, we don't really need to replant it. But the second you take away, 10 to 20% of all of the plantings in the region, all of a sudden your pricing can go up a little bit more because there's nothing available.
Yeah, it's a real scary thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, since we've started, we've lost probably half the different plantings we've worked with,
Mm-hmm.
just getting ripped out for various reasons. I mean, we're working with the original Vermentino
Mm-hmm.
and some Frulano that was just ripped out because it was a hassle to farm by a big company. And it was very historic. It was first planted by Ken Volk, who's like a legend where we are. And, it's just, it's dollars and cents, and people don't really care. And so we knew with Lunamata, it had this amazing variety of interesting grape varieties from our Italian stuff to Rhone stuff. It was like early pick pull planting, and
Super cool.
we knew sooner or later
It'd be gone.
that this would happen, but it happened enough already that we had prepared by getting some other people to plant stuff that were sick of selling grapes to the big boys and getting pushed around because they have a lot of power to push small vineyard owners around, and small vineyard owners who live on the land, who want to stay there for a long time, like working with people like us, especially my wife, who's funny and reasonable and helps them think about their big picture of farming and has a lot of experience. So we are always prepared. And then we early on bought a little place that we planted to our own vines that no one can rip from us.
Yeah.
I mean, we hopefully won't run out of water because there's been huge plantings around us that are sucking tons of water out of the ground. So that's a big concern. But yeah, I'm sure everybody wants to make wine now.
Yeah.
After hearing this
no, yeah. Well,
fun story.
But I think it's important. And I think that, one of the things that is a big focus for us on the podcast and that we're trying to incorporate in our lives a lot more is like intentionality of consumption. It's like, yes, you can go to the grocery store and you can just grab whatever bottle off the shelf, but realize by doing that, if you're grabbing just the bigger brands just because you don't care, or maybe you're just not thinking about it, like you could take a split second to make a decision to support a smaller family-owned and operated operation of any kind, whether it's a farm or a winery,
right,
and help kind of keep that character and complexity and culture alive.
Yeah, I mean, the big problem is, you go to the grocery store, a big wine store, corporate-owned wine store. I'm not going to name names because I don't want to get anyone angry, but you can see 100 labels and they all might be made by the same company,
right? Yeah.
In the same facility,
Yep.
and it's a bunch of marketing, and there's no real people or family behind that. And that's I mean, we all know that's happening, but a lot of times young consumers don't know. I mean, I didn't know that when I first got into wine, but I quickly wanted to visit and learn about wineries, and so that's great that you're educating people about that.
Yeah. I mean, to us, it's one of those things where like we also don't want to like call out a bunch of brands, because I also think it's important. We all need a gateway wine, right? Like when I first started selling wine, it was barefoot. And when I first started drinking wine, it was barefoot. And my grandma still drinks barefoot, to her, it's fine. And,
right.
And it fits the need. She has one glass every 3 days or whatever. And that's enough for her.
That's fine. I mean, and I remember when the whole $2 Chuck thing started, and, I was broke, and it was like $2. Like, come on, I'm going to drink this stuff. This isn't
cheaper
bad.
Than a six-pack, yeah.
And then I started using it for cooking, and it wasn't bad for cooking.
Yeah,
but it gets people in the game, and hopefully it leads to more, intelligent choices and introspection.
Yeah. That's the dream. One of the other things that I wanted to kind of talk about, and this is something that I maybe should have ran this by you before, so I don't know if you feel like talking about it as much, but there was a brand before Giornata. Do you want to highlight that at all, or? Yeah,
well, it wasn't before, so I started a brand
I guess
with
19 years ago. Yeah.
yeah, with a partner called Broadside, and that was really the thought was, well, this will help, by working with more mainstream varieties, pay to get our other stuff going.
Yeah.
But what we didn't realize is that doesn't really work, because the wine business is very difficult.
Yeah.
But it was very successful. It grew. And we it actually grew so fast that we couldn't keep up, and we had to sell it because the bank wouldn't give us more money to keep funding the growth.
Buy
and it
more
was
stuff,
Cabernet, and that's kind of a lesson that I learned. I don't want to say the hard way, but it was a good lesson. And didn't really make money, but got out of it, and it did teach us a lot, and we were able to grow Giornata while we were doing that, and it gave us exposure, which also helped our other wines. So yeah, but it was cool because we got to work with Cabernet, Chardonnay, the more mainstream varieties, and so when people say, well, you don't know anything about them, I'm like, yeah, I do. I've worked with all that stuff.
Right.
And Stephy's...
I still made the choice to do this.
Yeah, Stephy's farmed, Rhone grapes, and I don't think we've ever done much with Pinot. We had a little Pinot label called Antic for a while that we kind of shelved, but it's all trying to learn. I mean, that's what we did early on, and you talk about intentionality. I mean, now it's like, we go to Italy once, twice, or 3 times a year. I mean, this year we're going 3 times, and we always come across stuff. The last few years, Cesanese really kind of lit a fire under us, and it's a Roman variety that's ancient. They always say it's the most ancient variety, but I don't know if that's Aglianico, Falangina, but Cesanese, it's very historic. It's really exciting. It's it kind of reminds me of like a Loire style red. It's but it has a lot of diversity depending on the producer. They're so popular in Rome that you can barely find them here. But we're going to plant some and play around with it.
Awesome.
So, we're kind of done doing the mainstream stuff. We're trying to kind of go deeper down the boutique grape path, so to speak. So.
That's awesome. Yeah, the first orange wine that we poured before we were on was the Lumen wine, and he just recently planted some Ruque.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like...
Yeah, that's cool.
Randall Graham was the one that suggested that to him, and I'm like, that's pretty cool. You guys have any Ruque? Intention of growing Ruque?
Don't tell Steffi, because she'll plant it. No, we have Nero de Troia, and we have...
Oh, Jesus.
We're looking at Frappato. We're doing some Nero d'Avola.
Yeah.
It's kind of stupid because you can only sell so much wine.
Sure.
It gets confusing for your customers. Your distributors don't want more wine right now.
Yeah.
But we still want to learn and explore. So but a lot of people, Sam Bilbro, if you know him, Idlewild, works with Italian stuff. I mean, he's been doing Timorasso. I think he did the first Timorasso in California, and it's kind of like, why didn't I think of that? No, but it's like really cool, and he's really proud of it. He actually mislabeled the vintage or something. It was really funny, but he's like, we only did 50 cases. So
oh, that's so funny. Yeah.
But it was really good. I mean, it tasted like Timorasso. I mean, Timorasso, it has like some of that petrol-y, like Riesling quality. It's crazy, and it had all that, and it was planted here, and I'm like, it's so cool to me. Awesome. It's exciting.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, Kevin Monk, who just retired from our company, did a team meeting for us one time, and his presentation was, we just poured wines, and we weren't supposed to talk about the presentation, and we were supposed to try to backwards engineer it. And one of the things that we figured out was he was pouring your Sangiovese and your Aglianico, and he was pouring them alongside of a Sangiovese and an Aglianico producer that we have in both of those regions, or their respective regions. And we were kind of like heads or tails over like, which one was Italian and which one was California. So it was really cool to see
That's cool.
like
Yeah.
how like much the grape was able to speak, not necessarily above the terroir, but alongside the terroir.
Yeah, and I've been in a lot of those situations over the years, blind tastings with our stuff, and I mean, I could easily select a lineup of Italian wines and a lineup of our wines, and you would swear that the Italian wines were California,
Right.
and ours were Italy,
Yeah.
or vice versa, depending on the amount of oak, the ripeness,
Vintage, all that.
vintage. Yeah. So, I mean, it's fun to do that, and it makes me happy when that happens. But it's also, I never like to insult Italians and say, "Oh, we're doing a better job than the
Sure.
Italians." It's to me, it's all about purity. Like we want our wines to be super pure. I always say, true to variety is number one, because if it doesn't taste like that variety, we've kind of lost it. And then we want it to taste like the place it's grown, which is Paso, and the vintage that it was grown in. And then as far as quality and like, is the wine good? I mean, that's like that's subjective.
Right.
Like that's for wine critics or you or consumer or wine club, whoever. Right. I mean, if we do those three things, that's all we're doing. I mean, that's all that matters.
I think that's important. It kind of gives you also like a little bit of focus, or a list of priorities rather.
Yeah.
Makes things a little bit easier to focus on moving forward. One of the other things that I wanted to talk about was the Amphora series of the wines, and kind of like, was there a particular winery that was your inspiration for the Amphora series, and also if you could just touch on the Amphora series that you're doing as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was really Gravner, just because, but 15 years ago it was different, like, because Gravner was still pretty much under the radar, and I mean, now, I give a lot of credit to Foradori, but I don't even know if she was really doing much with Amphora then, but Elisabetta, but for me, it was just another way to explore our wines in a different context. So, should I taste this blind?
No, I mean, you can.
I'll just wolf it down. But it was just to see what would happen, because I liked what I tried. I thought they were interesting, different. And it's funny because when we first started that project, there was a lot of interest because it was so new. And then there was an article in the New York Times or something a couple years after we started that said orange wines are dead, because we were doing skin contact whites or like, but what it actually did is it introduced a whole bunch of new people to the category.
Orange wine? Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's had like 3, probably even 4 little bumps, and now we made this, which isn't an amphora, because the popularity has been crazy.
Right.
I mean, we would sell out immediately. So
the first vintage that we got of this, I remember making a couple placements with it by the glass, and it's like, awesome. And then 2 months later we were sold out, and all my accounts were like, what the fuck, dude? And I'm
sorry,
like, oh.
sorry about that.
No, it's fine. No. It's a good thing. I mean,
yeah, it surprises us all the time. But yeah, I mean, I think, for us, I mean, amphoras, all the different varieties we're working with, I think we have a sense that there's a lot of people out there who are willing to experiment and explore, and we can take chances and risks, because it's almost like by not doing that, you're taking more risk. You're almost taking less risk at this point by doing something different and putting yourself out on a limb a little bit. So this is the wines are never like officially like blindable wines. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. This is more just for us to have a wine and talk, and then we'll reveal it later. But just I poured orange because I was like, it's a little warm. I don't know if I'm ready to go into full red. But the reason I bring up the Amphora series wines is because when I started at Chambers, obviously, like,
I found a lot of success with the Il Campo wines that you're doing, kind of the more entry tier wines, if you will, the red and white blend, because of the incredible price point on those wines. And I didn't really get into the Amphora series of wines because I didn't really have the account base for it. But I remember when Matthias Scarborough came to town year and a half ago.
That guy's crazy.
Year and three. I know, he's crazy. He would wake up in the morning and run over the Golden Gate Bridge and come back and then shower and work all day and stay out all night. And then run the Golden Gate Bridge again.
He scared me.
He's scary, yeah. It was maybe almost right under 2 years ago, I think, he came out. And I remember he came back to the city after he had done like a thing. And he like could not stop talking about your Amphora wines. And he was just like, he had gotten an old one from you and was just like so blown away with the ageability of the wines. And I was like, oh, I need to get into these more.
Yeah, I think those Amphora skin contact. I mean, they really aged. I saw one at K&L, like a 2000 Gravner.
That's awesome.
It's little beyond my price range.
Sure.
But I mean, I'm sure it was great.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the cool thing about the skin. I still hear people who are like, "Oh, I don't like skin contact." And it's like, well,
everything's a little skin contact.
What's there not to like?
Right.
I mean, it's just a different expression of this grape variety. And the cool thing is, some of them age really, really well. Like, we don't have that much time doing them, but 10 years old. I mean, they're beautiful wines.
That's so cool.
And so I mean, I think it's awesome.
Yeah, I've been I never see it, but we went to Oregon one time and went to this cute bottle shop in Portland. I wish I could remember the name so I could give them a shout out. And Bianca and I walked in and I had just gotten Shelley's book and we were reading about producers in it, and it was like Radicon. And I was like, oh, I've never heard of these wines. I'm never going to see those wines. And then the next day I walked into the shop and they had two bottles of the 15.
Yeah.
And I just grabbed them, the 500 milliliter bottles. They're super cool and cute.
Yeah.
And we opened one for our official wedding. We've been domestic partners, but we opened one for our wedding last year. And it was just like so cool. And we're like, the next one we're just going to hang on to for
the Radicon wines, I probably prefer them maybe a little over Gravner.
Sure.
And they're better price point too.
Yeah.
But it's they're beautiful wines.
They're super cool.
I love them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, Steffi and I will try different things, and we're like, wow, this is kind of a revelation. We have a winery, so why don't we try to do something like this? And
that's
we
awesome.
kind of visit people and reverse engineer stuff, and we're the owners, we're the bosses.
Yeah.
We have one assistant winemaker who's super on board with doing cool stuff, and it's like we don't have a board of directors. We have to talk so let's go for it.
That's awesome. I love that. We'd be remiss to not talk about a couple other things that are important. I'll have to ask, when in the timeline did the pasta company come to fruition, and how did it get so big so fast?
Well, yeah, it's taken a while. It seems like quite a slog, but so the pasta thing, I mean, it really came about. We have people visiting the winery all the time. We talk about food pairings, and we are always talking about pasta. I mean, when I worked in Tuscany, I mean, the cingale sauce with pappardelle or peachy, I mean, I loved it. It was one of those things when I moved to San Francisco, I fell in love with mapo tofu. So I'd go everywhere, and then dim sum. And so in Tuscany, it was like this cingale sauce, the wild boar sauce. And I wanted to have it everywhere I could. And I love pasta. So we talk about our wines in the context of Italian food, and that leads us to pasta many times. And there was a spot near the winery. I was helping a friend open a restaurant. It was too small, and I had this idea. When I was in college, I worked at an Italian deli that made a little pasta, and I was like, we could make some pasta and we could sell our wine there, and it just made a lot of sense. And I was like, So did research, and it actually took me 2 years to kind of figure out the right equipment, the flour. I wanted to dry it, dryers, how to dry, and then we set it up and started going. Our first customer was my kids' Montessori school. So all the parents, their kids would say, "Oh, we had the best pasta," and they were eating, loved the pasta. So the parents started coming, and then I have friends that have restaurants. They wanted it, and it just kind of snowballed from there. So, but now we've been doing it like 7 years, and it's been a journey.
Yeah, it feels like it's flourishing, and I mean, like, I remember first trying it at West Coast Wine and Cheese when they were open.
Yeah, right on.
They always had it on the menu all the time, and I remember when I started, people at Chambers kept talking about it, and
That's cool.
Marissa Payne's wedding, they gave it on when you were getting back onto the shuttle bus. Everybody got little bags of different kinds of pasta from you guys, and
See, I never even know about this.
yeah, it's so cool. I mean,
That's
and
cool.
it's just so
That's great.
And the day that Kevin did the presentation for us, and we were tasting your Alianico versus a Campagna producer's Alianico, he gave everybody a box of pasta to take home too. That was very sweet.
That's
so that's really cool. Are you still importing all of? Well, I guess here it says American grain, Italian.
Yeah, it's all the grain. It's organic American grain, and it's funny because Italy doesn't grow enough grain for their pasta production, so they import a lot of it. And
That's so funny.
and I don't know for sure, but I know they import quite a bit from the U.S. and Canada, Ukraine, which is obviously a huge problem,
Yeah.
and they're getting grain from all over the place. But we can grow plenty of grain here to make great pasta. So why not, instead of shipping our grain to Italy, having them make it, shipping it back, why not make it? And doing research and kind of doing the same thing I learned about winemaking in Italy. I found the best equipment that the producers who make my favorite pastas use, and just kind of followed their recipe. And it's in a lot of ways simpler than wine, but you have to be very exact, like very exact.
Right.
So it's following a very strict, it's like baking, like a very strict recipe. Drying is very tricky.
I'm sure it's even harder. Yeah.
Yeah, drying it's extremely tricky. I didn't throw pasta away. I gave it to food banks and stuff, which we still do, which is cool. But I destroyed a lot of pasta, and it was still edible, but it would fall apart and crack.
Right.
And so it took a good year to figure out. But now we're kind of off to the races.
Yeah, that's awesome. And the brand Etto, the name means?
Etto is 100 grams, so it's like a quarter pound, but it's a portion. And, Etto is an important word to me because when I first moved to Italy, I didn't know the language at all. And just to buy food, like I'd see these ladies going, un etto de prosciutto and etto de formaggi. So they're ordering, quarter pound of this, quarter pound of that.
Right.
So I just point at stuff and say Etto, Etto, Etto,
That's so funny.
and then I'd have my food for the night and go back to my place and eat. And but it's really a portion of pasta.
That's great. And then the brand and the pasta gave way to the restaurant. Is that the order that it went in?
Yeah. So the restaurant that I helped open for a friend, they closed it during COVID, and we kind of got begged to reopen it under Etto because we already had a pretty big brand going, and the folks who were partners in the restaurant said, "Hey, what about?" And we were right next door, and I was like, I don't know. We got a lot going on, but my wife has a restaurant background. There's a chef involved who I knew really well, and he had a passion for the project. And but in the end, I mean, we've been open 2 years. I think it was a really smart move because it brought everything together. So what we were doing with the pasta, the wine, you can buy our wines as well as 100 different Italian wines that I love on the wine list, and it kind of brings the two projects together. It's pretty cool, I think.
And then the next step is a cookbook.
Yeah. So we got asked
Because you're not doing enough things and you don't have enough on your plate.
Well, it's one of those things, flattering things where Edible Magazine, our local chapter of Edible, which you have up here, we've done a lot with them. And they said, we want to launch our first cookbook and we really want to do it with you. And we have a very experienced cookbook author. We have this, we have that. And I mean, we put in a lot of work. We had all the recipes because I write a newsletter and I put recipes in the newsletter. So we had the recipes. They had their own photographer. And we actually produced the whole cookbook in like 4 months.
Wow.
Like, I don't think it's going to win a James Beard Award.
Whatever.
But it's really it's recipes that I make and a couple people that I work with make all the time, and it's all specific to this pasta. So people that buy our pasta, they always ask me, what should I do? What should I make? Well, here's a cookbook. Here's 100. It has 100 or so recipes. So that'll probably be out, I think, March or April.
And what's the name of the cookbook?
It's just the Etto Pasta Cookbook.
Etto Pasta Cookbook. That should be easy to remember. And then recently you've gone on Amazon with the pasta. So anybody can purchase it now.
Yeah. I mean, that was one of those things. Through a friend, I met a guy who worked at Amazon for a long time. And he said, we've been in a few Whole Foods and, Amazon bought Whole Foods. And he said, yeah, well, I can, if you want to go on this journey to get on Amazon. I'm like, what do you do? Just put your box up. But it's a process. I mean, like retina scanning kind of stuff. Yeah. It's pretty intense. So, and the photography has to be perfect. And I mean, there's all these rules and it was very educational. We're still actually in the process. Like, you can buy 3 of our 12 pastas on Amazon.
Okay.
And we'll have them all up there, but each one actually takes a lot of work which I had no idea. I thought, you have a product.
Sure.
You just sell it on Amazon.
And just hyperlink it or whatever. Yeah.
Doesn't work that way.
That's so funny.
So, but it's good because, they do some serious vetting on products. So if you buy something off Amazon, you're actually getting what you buy. So maybe that's a positive. So, So
that's great.
Buy it on Amazon.
I think that's important. It's better than you throwing it away and somebody else grabbing it and putting it on the website and having to buy it off there. You know what I mean?
Totally.
And then this, I don't know if you want to share the story, but it would be great to share the story, the Pasta King story.
Well, so people were calling me the Pasta King, and there was a video made by the local Paso wine or Paso travel marketing organization, and I mean, it got like 500,000 views. So people started calling me the Pasta King, and then a longtime friend of mine who I hadn't seen for a long time made me a crown out of pasta. I should have brought it because it's really funny. But so I started wearing it for different silly things, and there's pictures of me in it, and so it's kind of one of those things that's stuck. And the funniest thing is my wife was involved in this accident, and she was fine. She wasn't a part of it, but she had to make a statement to the state trooper north of Paso, and he was looking at her ID and wrote it down and said, this name sounds really fun. Then he goes, are you married to the Pasta King? and that was where I was just like, oh my God, this is so the funny. Best. I was like, I need billboards now in Paso. With me with the crown and the Pasta King. Yeah. And it's funny too, because we've been doing wine for 19 years and we're still kind of under the radar with our wine, but the pasta thing in our town is like not everyone, but nearly everyone knows it. I mean, it's become a significant brand, so
that's important.
It's cool.
And I think too, one of the things I'd really love for you to highlight is just kind of like all the stuff that you're doing for the community and for the schools with this brand as well. I think it's really cool to see this and to see the time and intention that you've put into this stuff, and a lot of that can be, not necessarily funded, but kind of funded by people supporting smaller wineries, right? Like, this shows us kind of like the full circle of intentionality. You've been able to create food to go with the pasta, create a cookbook to help people cook it, and now...
Yeah, so schools, we've gone big into public schools. We started, pretty local, but now we're all the way from Santa Barbara up to Monterey. So that's a huge area.
Huge.
I mean, a couple 100 miles. And almost every school in that swath has had our pasta, and some regularly have it, sometimes once a week. Mm-hmm. So that's a lot of volume that we're having to keep up with. But it's, we offer a good price because the volume's high. It's low glycemic. It's totally single ingredient, very natural. So we're giving the kids a great product. The schools that we're working with, it's mostly young women who went through nutrition programs who really care about what is served at school lunches. It's really amazing. We've been to a bunch of school lunch conferences, and there's organizations now that are up in the Bay Area and different places that want to get us more involved in school lunch because it's become a big movement in California and even beyond. So we ship pasta to a school in Vermont, which I was like, wow, that's kind of crazy. But I mean, I was like, you got to be able to find something closer. And they're like, we've been trying. We like your pasta. But it's cool. And, and then we also give to some different organizations. There's Echo, homeless shelter. We've donated quite a bit to, and there's some other food insecurity programs that we regularly donate to when we have leftover fresh pasta at the end of the week. And that's all good stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I think everyone who makes food, instead of letting stuff go to waste, should figure out how to repurpose. Yeah. So that's a big part of what we do.
I love that. That's awesome. Well, the two wines that we have here today are the Orangotango, which this is the 2023. This is the third vintage.
Yes.
Which is a Falanghina-based blend with skin contact. And then the Alianico, this is from the French Camp Vineyard, which is still planted.
Yeah.
Thankfully, for now.
Yeah, they actually want to replant our stuff because they have some ideas on how to do it better. So they're a big fan of what we're doing. It's a big vineyard owned by the same family that owns Biennacido.
Okay.
But they like what we're doing. So they want to keep working with us, which is great.
That's killer. Let's see, what else? What do you think about the wine? You like the wine?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, it's, it's a trick question. I mean, I get some Bordeaux-y qualities here.
Yeah. It's more just that you like it. You can. I love if you want to explain it, but I don't. There's no pressure.
I mean, I like the balance.
Yeah.
And I like the. It's got that kind of cassis bordering on. With some people would say it's bell pepper, but to me, I love bell pepper, so I get that, more cassis quality. But
yeah. This is a winery that maybe I should have triple checked, but I feel like it's a winery that you're familiar with, maybe a winery that you may be friends with. But this is
Lucho.
Yeah, Vignalta. This is the
of course.
2010.
Lucho slept on my couch.
Drunk, hopefully.
Yeah.
This is blackmail. This is the time. This is the Arca. This is the Merlot Cabernet Sauvignon blend.
Well, so I wasn't too far
No,
off.
you were so close. You nailed it. It has Bordeaux characters. It has the cassis.
But it had this old world thing, but ripeness.
It's holding up so well considering that it's now a 15-year-old wine, right?
I didn't know. I swear to God. No, his wines are spectacular. I've spent time at his place. I've had his magnums of sparkling. I've hung out with his wife, and then he slept on our couch when our twin daughters were like 5 years old, I think one of them came outside, and he's a big bearded fellow, and they ran back in the room. I think they thought there was a bear sleeping on our couch or something. But
that's funny.
he's also, this is a good story. So I was out with him in a restaurant one time, and it was an Italian place that's pretty decent, but server came out and said, well, how do you like the soup? And he goes, tastes like shit from a can. I was like, oh. And they were like friends of mine, and I was like, oh, sorry about that. He's from Italy. But he's a good guy, Lucio.
That's funny. Yeah, he makes a lot of wines. At for 3 years now, I've called on Rich Table, and they've carried the Fior di Arancia, the sparkling Moscato d'Asti.
Yeah.
Well, I guess not the Asti, but the sparkling Moscato. The wine is just killer. And then the late harvest 500 ml, and then the Pasito style, and he's making Pinot Noir. And
I mean, his path is similar to mine because he's doing Bordeaux varieties, even though he would say these are Italian because they've been in Italy for 300 years.
Yeah.
And so he has a lot of explaining to do to sell these wines, or you as a rep, unless people really know, unless they're. And that's the same thing I have to do.
Yeah.
Like, what is this grape? Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
So I kind of have a kinship with Lucio.
And then the Gemola is also a thing that you share in common, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, Gemalaya is ours, and
sorry.
Gemola is his.
Oh, I see. Oh, my mistake. I'm sorry.
No,
I thought maybe they were an ode to each other.
When he also did, I think he did a Petite Syrah.
Wow.
One time or something.
Well, that's funny.
Not a good idea.
Shoot from the hip. Gotta swing the miss. It's gotta swing the hit, I guess. Cool. Anything you think you want to add on? Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you maybe want to touch on?
No, I think we're always up for visitors down to Paso, and we love what we do. Our journey's been pretty fulfilling, and we're still going. So
yeah.
It's awesome. Pretty cool.
Any last words of wisdom or any advice you want to offer anybody, or a statement you want to make? A way to sign off. Yeah.
I mean, just eat more pasta, drink more Italian wine. I'd say that.
Yeah.
That's
California Italian wine.
Yeah. Well, fake Italian wine like we do. No, I think just find what you like, and that's it. And like he said, I mean, supporting, family business goes a long way in this day and age.
Yeah.
And even though we're working with Amazon, we at least, are able to sell our product.
Yeah.
I mean, think about how to support family business.
And you're not just selling it at a incredibly high price because you can. You're figuring out a way to also get it into schools and get it to our children and teach our children about intentionality, which I think is like really the only way forward, so.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me in.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on. Cool.
Cheers.
Cheers.